Good evening, everybody. It's Christmas Council. No one said, oh, no, it isn't. I'm deeply disappointed. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance this evening. Before we make a formal start, we shall observe in the usual fashion prayers said by my chaplain, the Reverend Julia Cody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. At the end of each prayer, when I say, Lord, in your mercy, you're invited to respond, hear our prayer. Everlasting God, we pray for world leaders, for Charles, our King, for all who serve in Parliament, in government, on councils, for all whom we elect to political service, praying especially for those who serve on South Staffordshire District Council. Encourage those who strive for peace and reconciliation, all who courageously speak the prophetic words of justice. May the common good be honoured and liberty and equality upheld. Lord, in your mercy. Wonderful Counselor, Prince of Peace, guide with your wisdom all who carry the burden of leadership, all who rule and bear the responsibility of government. God of truth and justice, we pray for those who govern and rule nations, for community leaders and those with local responsibility. Give them courage to face up to necessary decisions even when unpopular, wisdom to steer a course when vision is incomplete, and compassion never to overlook those affected by the consequences. Lord, in your mercy. Lord of truth and understanding, in this busy Christmas season, we pray for places of education and learning, for schools and colleges, further and higher education institutions, for study courses and imaginative programs for lifelong learning. And we pray for all who have challenges, those who suffer from prejudice, those with disabilities, those with neurodiversity, those under excessive pressure. We pray for teachers and assistants in the classroom, for school governors, for those who provide administrative support, for education authorities and all who determine decisions of policy. We thank you for teachers who have inspired us and unlocked doors for our learning. Lord, in your mercy. And Lord of all, we pray for all our communities in South Staffordshire. As we approach Christmas, we pray especially for those who are homeless, living in sheltered accommodation, those unable to cope on their own, those who are lonely, unwell, bereaved. For all who find this a particularly difficult time, may we be aware of those in our communities who are struggling and be good neighbours to them. Praying also for all those who care for others, especially young carers. May the message of Christmas, of light in the darkness, bring comfort and a glimmer of hope. Lord, in your mercy. And we draw our prayers together as I invite you to say with me the Lord's Prayer in its traditional form. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, for coming to minister to us at this particularly busy time of year. I know your diary is pretty packed. Thank you for that. You may be seated, members. So starting off with our formal agenda, everybody, we start with item 1. Do we have any priority business, Mr. Hayward?
Chairman, I can confirm there's no priority business this evening.
Lovely, thank you. Item 2, the first of 2, in fact, minutes. These are the minutes of the meeting of council held on the 24th of September 2024. They're before you at the start of your pack, as you might expect, everybody. Is it your wish that I confirm and sign the minutes of council held on the 24th of September? Thank you, everyone. So moving on to item 3, the second of 2. Minutes again, the minutes of the meeting of council held on the 8th of October 2024 on page 5 of your document pack. Is it your wish that I confirm and sign these minutes held on the 8th of October? Item 4. Are there any apologies, Mr. Hayward?
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from councillors Andy Adams, Barry Bond, Phil Davis, Robert Reid, Wendy Sutton, Helen Adams, Fiona Hopkins, Victoria Wilson, Val Chapman and Kath Williams.
Thank you. So we move on to item 5, declarations of interest. So bearing in mind the agenda we have tonight, everybody, do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Nobody indicating. Thank you. That moves us on to item 6, questions under Council Procedure Rule 11.4. Can I pass to Mr. Hayward?
There are none, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you, Dave. Item 7, now turning to page 9 of your packs. We have the report from the Leader of the Council, so it gives me great pleasure to pass over to Council Leader, Councillor Kath Perry, MBE. Kath, would you like to introduce your report?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good evening, everybody. It's been a busy period since becoming Leader of the Council. The Leader's report circulated with the agenda reiterates this, with a range of reports being brought forward by officers of the Council for Cabinet members to consider since September. We'll highlight each portfolio holder in turn, but first a general overview as Leader. The last 12 months has been another challenging but strong year as the Council celebrated its 50th year anniversary. Performance across the various service teams has remained strong. 17 out of 21 annual targets met. High performances from our high volume services, waste scoring 4 stars out of 5, customer service is 97% calls being answered within 1.5 minutes on average. Resident satisfaction of the district remains very high, with 95% of this year's respondents saying they would recommend South Staffordshire as a place to live, our highest score yet. 97% of our workforce from the hub and 86% from our outreach sites would recommend the council to work for, which is an excellent result. National recognition from ICE, who recognised us in their 15th year anniversary by naming us as only one of the only 8 councils who have been entered into the Hall of Fame. Welfare Service won a national award for their Creating Brighter Future programme, and the Super Codsall Community Hub has also won a national government award. And finally, and importantly, we've just received a clean bill of health from our external auditors for this year's financial accounts. The next 12 months, full of challenges, lots of unknowns at present, future financing, waiting on the English Devolution White Paper, waiting on the National Planning Policy Framework, uncertainty on whether we will get any further homeless prevention funding to ease pressures on temporary housing pressures. A critical year for our local plan, and all being well, we will be accepted for examination in 2025. And some tough conversations will need to be had on where we allocate future housing growth across the district. We will know the outcome of the re-tendering of our biggest contract, the waste services, so we can mobilise new service from April 2026. Great opportunities too. Further development of our emerging economic green corridor plans with the City of Wolverhampton and Staffordshire County Council. Exciting plans to expand our digital customer services programme and explore the potential to expand our commercial business development programme. Lots to look forward to. And as leader, looking forward to working with members and staff to continue to take this council forward. I'll now go on to any questions on portfolio areas. So I'm asking members if you've got any questions. My portfolio first, corporate services. You've all seen what's been put in your agendas. Are there any questions, please?
Any questions, anybody? Non-signalling there.
Thank you, Chairman. Community services. Councillor Davies.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you. This is a question really about how we're supporting in the community our homeless people, and whether the properties that were going to be bought have now been refurbished and are ready and available, and whether we are expecting more demand on homeless services. If somebody can take that for me, please.
That'll be welfare services. You're taking that one?
Apologies, members.
Sit on that one. You sit down. Why not? Yes. In relation to the two properties, we're still just finalising the legals, and we're hoping that we'll be able to inspect them this side of Christmas to actually produce the schedule, so that come the new year, the work will commence on those. So certainly we're in train to actually get those two properties brought into our management. Thank you.
And the second part of the question is really about whether we are expecting, I'm afraid that in the new year, with the bills biting people's debt and debt recovery, more people are probably expecting to be homeless this winter, and whether we've got any forward planning in place for that and how it's going to be rolled out. Thank you.
Certainly in terms of, as you know, over the last 12 months, we've seen the numbers increase for us as an authority, and we're not expecting that to change, particularly in the short term. The team are very good at looking at alternative opportunities about how we can actually house people. We've got a very good relationship with the Housing Association, again, which we're looking at leasing some additional properties. We are still looking at whether or not we could purchase one further property potentially to help in the southern part of the district as well, particularly so that we get that spread across the whole district in terms of being able to support families. At the moment, we're doing everything we can and looking at things about how we use payments to support people to remain within their existing homes when they're in debt. So there is a whole raft of things that the actual team are working on. It's almost a continuum of what we're doing. Thank you. Estates, Asset and Commercial Services, Councillor Williams. Are there any questions for Councillor Williams? None. Thank you, Chairman. Regulatory Services, Councillor Heseltine. Are there any questions? Thank you, Chairman. Planning and Enterprise Services, Councillor Evans. Thank you, Chairman. And Welfare Services, once again, Councillor Barrow. Thank you. I move for that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry, for that, and thank you, Jackie, for literally stepping into the hot seat there. I think I would ask members: are there any further questions? But it seemed not, so we'll move on. Are you content that the report be noted? Lovely, thank you, everybody. We shall therefore move on to item 8, turning this time to page 23 in your packs. We have the report from the chairman of committees giving a brief update to council on what has taken place in their committees since last reporting at the last full council meeting. If any chairman wishes to speak, please indicate now. Not a Lovely, thank you, everybody. We will move on with that then. Are there any questions on the chairman's reports, members? No? Okay, thank you. Members, are you content that this report also be noted? Thank you, everybody. Item 9. There are 2 proposed changes to committee membership which are set out in your papers. Both are in relation to membership of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee and are, as I understand it, with the agreement of those involved. Do we have a proposer?
Changes, Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you, councillor Perry. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, thank you,
Councillor
Chairman.
Merrick.
I'd like to second that motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, councillor Williams. Members, are there any questions? No, no questions. Does anybody wish to speak on this item? No. Okay, thank you, everybody. All those in favour, can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you, everybody. I'm told it is unanimous. The motion is carried. Item 10. We now turn to page 27 in your pack and a report proposing the adoption of a statement of gambling principles. Can I ask the Cabinet Member for Regulatory Services, Councillor Rita Hesseltine, to present the report, please? Over to you, Rita.
All the information that you require is here, but I've just got a few more notes that I would just like to read to you. You will be aware that we're required to have a policy in relation to our statement of gambling principles, and this provides the framework for decisions on matters within the district relating to the Gambling Act. The proposed policy is a refresh of our previous policy and will be effective for 3 years. The required consultation was undertaken in late summer with only one response from GamCare, who were broadly supportive of the proposed policy. It should be noted that this does not apply to online gambling, which is regulated by the Gambling Commission. It's proposed that the Council approve the Statement of Gambling Principles 2024 to 2027, and members, I so move that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hesseltine. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Merrick.
Yeah, I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Members, do we have any questions? Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Although it's not in the report, I think in the sense of online gambling being associated with this, I do think it's important that we do take note that online gambling, particularly among women, is increasing, which is of some concern to me. Many people have access to computers at home now, and post-COVID, we are in a different kind of world where we're using computers. Nevertheless, one of the things which concerns me is the sale of lottery tickets and scratch cards over counters in shops, which isn't a betting shop incident, as you understand. It's something which is commonly available, and I'm finding increasing numbers of people in my own community buying large volumes of these kinds of betting arrangements, which we have no control over. And I wonder how many, and if anybody's got any information about this, how many ordinary stores have actually got this facility. I realise it's not part of this report. However, it's a serious concern for some of us in our own communities. So I'm using this report to raise it, and perhaps we should be promoting more ourselves the Gambling Aware campaign because of this, and also looking at gambling in schools, because there are some school children who find themselves in difficulties having falsified their details on gambling websites. And I know this is a concern for schools in the area, and all schools are now required to teach about gambling. And I don't know if everyone knows that, but it's part of government guidance now. So I do think we need to heighten our awareness about this in the district generally, across several different sets of issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. A lot of detailed points there, I think all quite rightly, fairly made. That'll be noted and taken on board, I'm sure. Warren, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. My question on this really is just on these principles. Is there a scope to it? So does this include local fundraisers, raffles, football cards, for example? Do those groups, organisations who tries to use that sort of aspect to raise funds for their charities or for their organisation, would they be subject to this policy or are they excluded? Just if that could be clarified, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Oh, over to Lorraine.
Yes, depending on the nature and the extent of what's being operated, then yes, potentially they will. So they probably come under the small lotteries, or if it's a raffle, then there's provisions on that. But what I'd suggest is if any member has any kind of queries around that, to speak to John Chislett, the licensing officer, and he'd be able to give you a definitive view on what is and what isn't within the parameters. But yes, generally speaking, things like that are still caught by the gambling.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine. Members, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you, everybody. Does anybody else wish to speak on this item? No, it doesn't look that way, in which case we will move on to the recommendation. Just as a reminder, everybody, that is that this council approve the Statement of Gambling Principles 2024 to 2027. All those in favour, can I have a show of hands, please? There we are. I'm told it's unanimous, everybody. Thank you. The recommendation is approved. Item 11. We now jump a considerable way forward to page 91 in your pack and a report regarding taxi licensing delivery. Can I ask the chairman of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee, Councillor Vince Merrick, to present the report, please? Vince, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will be aware that following consultation with members and the taxi trade, in April 2022, the administration of all taxi licensing operators, vehicles and drivers was delegated to the City of Wolverhampton Council, who have continued to administer taxi licensing on behalf of South Staffs Council. The arrangement was initially for a 3-year period, which is due to conclude at the end of March 2025. The arrangement has worked very well with Wolverhampton financially in terms of delivery of the service and the enforcement of the sector. The trade has also benefited from lower fees as Wolverhampton can take advantage of economies of scale. The incentive for considering the delegation of this function 3 years ago was to improve and increase enforcement and to offer a safe, efficient, cost-effective service to the trade. The need for greater enforcement resources to monitor and deal with taxi licensing was also recognised as a result of various investigations, not involving South Staffordshire, into child sexual exploitation and increasing cross-border hire based on mobile app technology, example Uber. The resources of South Staffs and its partners in a small rural district council do not lend themselves to proactive enforcement. Conversely, Wolverhampton, where proactive operations are a daily occurrence, and extending those operations into South Staffs is a simple and cost-effective process. Wolverhampton has committed significant resources to enforcement. They have a dedicated out-of-area enforcement team who enforce the conditions of the licences wherever they operate in the country. South Staffs receives regular reports and updates, and to date, feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The trade has also increased in numbers since the transfer, giving greater availability and choice to the residents. It is proposed that we extend the term of the delegation and continue with Wolverhampton delivering the administration of this function on our behalf for up to a further 5 years. And members, I shall move for this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Do we have a seconder? Lovely, thank you, Councillor Heseltine. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Cope.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Forgive my ignorance, but do the Uber drivers come under the same regulation for taxi licences? Because I had a feeling that it was a different set of circumstances for Uber. I'm not sure of the answer to that, but yeah, I'm interested.
Thank you, Bob, for that question, Lorraine.
Yes, so Ubers are generally licensed as private hire vehicles and private hire drivers. So they're not Hackney carriages, they come under the private hire regime. I think the thing with Uber is some authorities weren't willing to license Uber because of their operating model, but most authorities now do authorise Uber as private hire drivers.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine. Members, any other questions? Councillor Allen?
Members may like to know an Uber taxi was floating in Tescott Ford this week. So I think there are some problems still with Uber.
Yeah, that's a unique problem, isn't it, Penny? Councillor Ashley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I say initially, I couldn't disagree more with the chairman's summary of the performance of the City of Wolverhampton Licensing Committee. I had a case earlier this year where a businessman had a headquarters in my patch and he was trying to renew his exemption licence for private hire business. He did the usual thing by going to Wolverhampton to get the necessary permission. He had several meetings as well with Wolverhampton people and with our licensing committee. And back in July 2023, he wanted to purchase a new vehicle. Again, top of the range, and he wanted it for his own business, which is a highly specialised hire business.
Jeff, just to query, is there a question coming, or is this
Questions?
more...
I'm putting a case, Mr. Chairman.
Go on, carry on.
This particular businessman, as I say, with a location in my patch, he went all through the hoops with the Wolverhampton people, and they prevaricated and they wouldn't give him the exemption licence that he wanted. They promised him certain things. And as I've mentioned, he came in desperation to see me in March of this year. I took the matter up with our licensing department, but basically they couldn't do very much about it because the decision on the matter was with Wolverhampton. So he couldn't very well do much about it. Anyway, after a period of some 6 months, and I tried to help this gentleman, we eventually got a formal complaint put in front of our licensing committee. This was in October this year.
Jeff, your question, please.
My question is, why are we proposing tonight to renew this particular scheme? Unless you want me to carry on, Mr. Chairman, in the next phrase of it, I don't mind.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. I think we get the point. This point in the meeting, in the process, is particularly for questions, but I think
okay,
everybody gets what you're saying. Members, any other questions at this stage? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. At 3.6, it says, in addition, CWC, obviously, City of Wolverhampton Council, have achieved the following. Daily automated DVS checking. So Uber's been mentioned. Ubers aren't registered in South Staffs. They could be from London, they could be from Scotland, but they can pick people up in our area because that's how they work their way back to their base. So how do we check their how do we check their DBS? For instance,
Thank you, councillor Steele. Fair question. Lorraine?
Any driver, regardless of where they're licensed, would have to undertake a DBS check. So it's a prerequisite of holding a driver's license, either a Hackney carriage or a private hire license, that you have a DBS check. So it doesn't matter where it's done, whether it's done here, Wolverhampton, Newcastle, every licensing authority will require a DBS check.
That satisfy councillor Steele?
yeah, yes, thanks. But there is one also about vehicle inspections. I assume there's sort of people going around the town pulling cars in for inspection. Can they just pull an Uber driver over and can they go in to be inspected?
Again, fair question, Lorraine.
Yes, absolutely. So when the City of Wolverhampton do enforcement operations, they will in effect pull over any vehicle that is displaying a licence plate, and then they have powers of inspection over those vehicles under, I think it's section 56, but don't quote me, of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, and therefore they can do that. If it's not one of our drivers, then they would make that reference to the licensing authority where that driver was licensed. So it does cover both.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine. Councillor John Brindle, I think, had your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. When you describe a VIP vehicle, it says Mercedes, Rolls Royce. You know what I'm going to say. But it doesn't say top of the range or expensive. So this is where the argument starts, is when you go for an exploration licence for very important people or very VIPs, and Wolverhampton say a criteria isn't met. So we need to look at that. The other one is, the question I've got is, how long was it taking to licence a driver? How long is it taking now to licence a driver?
Thank you, John. Lorraine?
I don't have the information on actual days that it takes to licence. I do know it is faster at Wolverhampton because they have the volume. They can do a more automated process than we used to do here, but certainly we can come back to you with that information.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine, for that. Members, any other questions? Nobody indicating, thank you. Dare I ask, does anybody wish to speak on this item? Councillor Ashley.
I wonder if I can continue where I left off, Mr. Chairman, because I've not finished.
As long as it is where you left off, Jeff.
Absolutely. Well, we got to the point where this particular issue was referred to the our licensing committee, and I'm very pleased to say that the exemption certificate was granted. But my concerns about this whole matter is this. I am aware that Wolverhampton have the opportunity to say yes or no, but there doesn't seem to be any comeback that we can do, and our licensing department cannot somehow liaise with them to see if we can get a solution. In this particular case, it was a small specialised company, and it took 18 months for them to get an exemption certificate for this specialised work that they carry out. And the business could have gone bust, Mr. Chairman, which was not a good process for us. One of the problems I've got, I can't particularly disagree with the logic of the present proposal, particularly with regard to the financial. But you know, coincidentally, I remember in 2011, I was involved in exactly this same situation where this particular firm applied for an exemption certificate for a hire purchase business. And our committee at the time quite easily dealt with it, and it was agreed. So the die was set, if you like. But again, as I said, Mr. Chairman, I can't disagree with the case put forward for an extension on financial grounds. But let me add a little caveat, if I may, Mr. Chairman. If this council considers in the future that it might want to hive off some of the traditional functions that this council carries out, perhaps on financial grounds, I don't know. But I think they'd be very wise to seriously consider the issue, because I think we're here to serve our council taxpayers and all our residents and businesses. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this particular case should give us a lot of thought for what future plans we may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley, for that. I know we may have started that in the former section, the questions section, but actually I think it's really important that we do give debate to this, and that's useful. The relevant officer will be in touch with you to discuss the specifics that you raised there. Next to speak, I think we had Councillor Harper-Wallis. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to offer some balance in the other direction, if I'd ask members to potentially look at, if you go to Manchester or Liverpool, you'll see that a lot of the taxi drivers there are also licensed by Wolverhampton, and that's a couple of reasons. One, because they're extremely efficient and they can run at scale, but also there's this nuance within the financing that any money made from the licensing or provision of licenses has to be ring fenced within the licensing. So therefore, the only way for that, if they're not hiring more people to service those accounts, they are giving discounts to the taxi drivers. So that benefits our taxi drivers. We are incorporated in that. So I think the agreement is a beneficial one. You could probably ask a wider question why we have this weird scenario where you have Wolverhampton doing, I don't know, Leeds taxi drivers, and maybe there's a case for centralisation. But we have to play with the cards we've got, and I think this is a good agreement and a good proposal.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Harper-Wallis. Members, anybody else wish to speak on this item? Councillor Allen.
As a member of the Licensing Committee who's received regular reports from Wolverhampton, I would say from everything that's being described to us during those meetings, there is a great deal of efficiency and forward-looking on the part of Wolverhampton, which is introducing smart badges for people so that they can check the identity of their driver, who's changing the way in which people are registering so that they get more efficient information about them. They've recently closed a website that somebody put up that was not for a non-licensed set of cars. So they have their finger on a lot of things which we would find it actually really difficult to keep up with ourselves. And that is really the reason greater efficiency in the by and large. I'm disturbed to hear what I'm hearing, but reports that we receive are extremely detailed, and I do feel myself that we are justified in continuing with joining up with this authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Does anybody else wish to speak? No? Okay, thank you all. Seeing as we have had some element of debate here, Councillor Merrick, do you wish to sum up?
Yes, Chairman, I'd just like to say a big thanks to all the committee members and officers of licensing, environmental, such hard-working people, and they deserve our thanks to my committee members and everything. They just deserve thanks, and I thank you all and wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Members, the recommendation before you is therefore, it is recommended that the Council approve the delegation of taxi and private hire licensing functions of South Staffordshire Council to the City of Wolverhampton Council for a further period of up to 5 years. All those in favour, can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you, everybody. Are there anybody opposed? And any abstentions? Lovely. Thank you, everybody. The recommendation is approved. Item 12, we now turn to page 99 in your packs and the external audit report. Can I ask the chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee, Councillor John Michel, to present the report? Over to you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It gives me great pleasure to present this report to the council. As you all know, this year we've had new auditors, assets, and we're waiting for their opinion. Following their review of our statement of accounts for 2023-24, it's very pleasing that we have another unmodified opinion, meaning that the auditors are happy with our accounts, that our accounts provide a true and fair view of the council's financial position. Azets presented this report to our audit committee and thanked the finance team for their responsiveness in dealing with queries and standards of the accounts in general. They've set out 4 minor recommendations which the council has responded to. These can be found on page 127 of your packs. Azets have not raised any follow-up concerns to these responses. One adjustment was also required to the accounts relating to our pension asset position, but this was due to a change in the way the external audit industry felt that it should be treated and not in any way an error on our behalf. Overall, this is another positive report for the council, particularly when we have new auditors who are taking a fresh look at our accounts. Council are recommended to note the contents of this report. And I'd like to add that being as it was new auditors, we were not apprehensive, but very interested in a second different opinion. And some of the words they used during the meeting, flawless, the presentation, and then when I spoke to them afterwards to get their opinion in comparison to other councils that they audit, their compliments were flowing. So they were very satisfied with us. And I think that, yet again, means we owe a big gratitude to our accounts team who've done a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michel. Do we have a seconder for this item?
Yes, Chairman, I propose to recommend to second the recommendation. You said my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. I've scanned through this report and there is a lot of positives in it, and listening to what the Chairman just said on there, on the comments when they attended. So I just want to point out, I think it's Appendix I, page 127. There's some amber risks that you've highlighted, and I think this one probably sounds more alarming than it actually is, because when you first read it, it does sound quite alarming. So I just wondered if Rebecca probably put some context on it. It's where it says, we noted a balance of £6,000 within the bank reconciliation that relates to suspense items. We inquired with the finance team, who mentioned this is an unknown transaction with no supporting documentation available. So could you just explain what a suspense item is? Just because obviously it sounds alarming, but it probably isn't. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Bex, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chairman. Yes, so the suspense account is where any income or any transactions go into where we initially can't identify where they should be coded to. And so that element would have been income into our bank account, because sometimes what you'll find is that when there's payments made into the council, if they don't include reference numbers, etc., on that with that payment, then we then have to investigate where it should be going and where it should be coded to. So that suspense account is where those amounts sit. So yeah, there was a very small amount, but as you can imagine, in terms of the amounts that actually come into the council on a daily basis, £6,000 within that suspense account is a very, very immaterial amount, and we have looked at our processes around that and made sure that we are chasing up any supporting documentation for any suspense items.
Thank you, Bex. Warren, that deal with your query?
Yeah, but just come back. So is it pretty normal then? Is that sort of every year that would sort of happen, or every audit, we have this suspense account, and these new auditors have just taken a different view.
Yeah, that's it's not something that's been picked up previously. Obviously, I've only been here the last couple of years, but it's not something that's been a regular thing that's picked up. Suspense accounts, every council will have suspense accounts with items in that need to be tracked and traced back to where they need to go. But it's not a finding that a prior year finding that again has occurred this year. So it's not a recurring thing.
Thank you, Bex. Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Page 106 at the bottom, volume in magnified of identified errors. There's a reference which I don't understand to IAS 19 report. Could you explain what that is, please?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Back over to you.
You're a glutton for punishment. The IAS 19 report is the report that our pensions actuaries produce to tell us what the valuation is of our pension asset or liability is at the point that we produce the accounts. And that's because there is a difference in how we account for pension contributions in the accounts as opposed to how we account for them against the general fund. And that's what that report does for us.
Thank you for that information. As part of the Audit and Risk Committee for the Diocese, I'm asking these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Members, anybody else? Any questions at this stage? No? Okay, thank you. Does anybody wish to speak on this item? Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to compliment the team, the councillors and the audit committee. We're seeing horror stories from other authorities. Birmingham are in trouble, Dudley, Shropshire and Thurrock, they got very entrepreneurial and got themselves into problems. I did see criticism of some of those councils that there wasn't sufficient scrutiny to observe where they were getting into difficulty. I'd like to think our council's well on top of this, and compliments to everybody concerned that it looks very much like we're a sound financial authority, and thank you for that. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Cope, and I think likewise everybody on that team appreciates those comments as well. Members, does anybody else wish to speak on this item? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. I think while we've got Councillor Fisher on the council, I think we can all sleep easy at night.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Allen, is that a hand?
Yes, it is. Just a very quick comment on page 108. The risk profile of the council and its primary objective to deliver public services, the equivalent of 2% of gross revenue, is very good. And I'm delighted with what you've been able to do with the accounts and for the committee and their scrutiny of this. It's not an easy job to do these numbers, and there are so many changes taking place in government regulation all the time that I really appreciate the way in which they're being handled. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Allen. Anybody else wish to speak? No? Okay, in which case I shall, again, we've had a little bit of debate here, so I shall move back to Councillor Michelle. John, would you like to wind up in any way?
Nothing really to add, just reiterate my thanks to the team. And makes my job of presenting it much easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. So members, just as a reminder, the recommendation in front of you is that members note the contents of the report. Are you content to note the report? Lovely, thank you everybody. The recommendation is approved. Item 13, turning to page 135 in your document pack, and a report regarding the consultation on remote attendance at council meetings. I know this has taken a number of members' interest certainly in recent years. Can I ask the monitoring officer, Lorraine Fowkes, to present the report, please? Lorraine.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. As members are probably aware, there's been quite a lot of local press or national press in respect of the proposed introduction of powers around remote attendance and indeed proxy voting. So we're currently, the government is currently consulting on introducing those powers for local authorities. That consultation period was launched on the 24th of October and runs for 8 weeks and concludes on the 19th of December. So the government state that whilst recognising the importance of attendance at meetings as part of the democratic process and the value of the interaction between members this brings, the government recognises that in certain circumstances remote attendance may be appropriate. So they've asked for responses via an online portal. A link to that portal is in the papers before you tonight, and I'm more than happy to email that round to all members following this meeting. But proposed response drafted by myself as monitoring officer, set it out in Appendix 1 to the report. And the reason we've done it that way as a response from the monitoring officer is then it doesn't in effect stymie any member from submitting their own response. So each and every member individually, if they so wish, can submit a response to this consultation. But the proposed response at Appendix 1 will go from myself as monitoring officer. So whilst I think we can all see the benefits of allowing remote attendance, it is submitted that generally speaking, in-person attendance should be the norm. I think all members see the benefit of that, and indeed, you know, being present tonight is an example of that. So it's suggested that in-person attendance should remain the default position, with remote attendance only permitted in certain circumstances. And as part of the consultation, the government haven't set out any parameters around that or any detailed parameters around when remote attendance should be permitted. And as part of the proposed response, I'm suggesting that should be a matter for local discretion. So the government may well legislate on the broad parameters, but then it's suggested for how that operates for each authority is a matter for that authority to set what they consider to be acceptable. So we're all aware that, you know, potentially in severe weather conditions, it may be appropriate at very short notice to switch from an in-person meeting to an entire remote meeting, allowing business to be transacted and members to take part, but not requiring them, for example, to travel through snowy conditions, etc. And that may be one of the issues where members say, yes, that's when we'll allow remote attendance. So the response set out in Appendix 1 is a broad response, just giving general support to those principles, but clearly stating that the individual decisions should be for the council. Moving on to proxy voting, I think this is potentially more problematic. I think if it is to be permitted, then there would need to be strict controls in place to ensure there is no abuse of that proxy voting. And certainly in certain circumstances, such as planning committee and licensing committee, you know, I don't see, we're all aware of predetermination. I don't see how anyone could proxy vote someone when you're determining a matter where listening to what is being said during that debate is absolutely crucial to your decision making. So I think in those circumstances, and the response suggests that it would not be appropriate in those circumstances at all. And if we are looking to adopt proxy voting, then it's one that should be approached with caution. And again, there would need to be, I think, strict criteria, and some suggestions around that are set out in the appendix. The Local Government Association, the umbrella body for local authorities, is submitting a response on behalf of its member local authorities. But as stated at the start, members, you're all encouraged to submit your own individual responses should you so wish, and I will send the link round to everyone tomorrow to enable you to do so. So the recommendation, members, are set out at point 7 of the report. It's to note the proposed response and that members note the 19th of December deadline to submit your individual responses. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine. Do we have a proposer?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I'd like to propose the report and the recommendations. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Perry. Do we have a seconder?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Harper-Wallis first, I think.
Just a couple of questions. In 3.7, it says it only permitted in certain circumstances. Who's doing the permitting, And what are those circumstances? How would we decide those circumstances?
That is to be determined. So what we're suggesting as part of the funds, the government may, if they do bring this forward, the government may legislate very tightly on this and tell us exactly when and when we can't permit remote attendance. If they leave it for local discretion, then that would be something we obviously we'd draft a scheme and bring it for members for approval. So members would be able to determine that.
Thank you, Lorraine. I have a feeling that is probably the same answer for a lot of questions that may come our way. Next, I think we had Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's around the proxy voting issue, and just to put my cards on the table for members that don't know this already, I'm very keen that we have remote access to meetings, but assuming that remote access to meetings and remote attendance includes the option of voting remotely, and as is pointed out in the answers to the questions about proxy voting, it's hard to think of a scenario where it would be actually needed, and the points you make about predeterminism are very obvious. But to me, I was slightly surprised, well, not surprised, but I wondered, did we consider answering no to question 10?
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Yes, absolutely. It was one of the options, and I think in my response I've actually put unsure rather than yes or no, because I think it is one where there are potentially pitfalls, and therefore if it is to be allowed, because you could see it circumstances where it may be appropriate, but I think it would be very, very rarely used, and it would have to be very tightly controlled.
Sorry, you want to come back, Paul?
Yeah, it's just it's hard to envisage how you could put appropriate safeguards in for the very, very small numbers of circumstances in which it would be appropriate that would cover off all the concerns that I'm sure members would have about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harrison. Anything to add on that? That's an observation, really, isn't it? Thank you. Councillor Allen, and then we'll come to Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. For General Synod for the Church of England, I am able to attend remotely and to vote remotely. I can't understand why they're looking at proxy voting when the facilities that we have online allow us to raise our hands, ask questions, and to vote by a tick or a cross. And that is exactly what we do, and it's electronically recorded for every single vote that we take at General Synod and released afterwards, named released. So it's possible for us to check the voting record of any person who's in that meeting at any time. It seems to me completely unnecessary to have a proxy vote in that situation. And because that applies to Teams and to Zoom, I don't know why we are even considering having proxy voting. If you can attend online and you can vote online, there is no reason really to have a proxy vote. I do question the fact whether I would want to phone anyone in this room and ask them to vote on my behalf in those circumstances. I think it's completely unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I think those comments are fully taken on board. Lorraine?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think the scenario that is generally put forward is you could have a member that is perhaps on maternity leave and therefore doesn't want to kind of be involved, you know, have to attend, be it in person or virtually, a council meeting, but may still want to partake by voting and may want to exercise a proxy vote. But I absolutely agree. You know, it's probably going to be once in a blue moon that if proxy voting is allowed, it would be appropriate. But ultimately, it will be a matter for what government legislate.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Come back on that, and just to say to you, it's perfectly possible to listen in any room of your house to any debate that you're taking particular interest in. And for General Synod, for instance, some people are unable to attend on some days because they have other regulatory duties, and they're not able to vote in those circumstances. I think so. Maternity leave or anything else, you can be in the bathroom, it doesn't really matter. You've got your camera switched off, you can still vote because you can hear the debate.
Thank you, Penny. Was there any question?
Yes, you can be in any exception. Isn't it true that you can be in any place, in your home and vote?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Fisher.
To be honest, Chairman, it's already now been covered between Councillor Allen and Councillor Harrison. But the only thing I was going to say is, for me, it was just an example given was like bad weather, where it was all going to be remote or all going to be in person. And I think for me, the much more likelihood is it is going to be for the odd member who can't make the meeting because of health reasons or something like that, where they can literally be given the opportunity to speak during the meeting and obviously cast their vote verbally. Would that still be classed as a proxy vote, even though they're there giving it live after the debate, or do they still say that is a proxy vote?
Thank you, Warren. Lorraine?
No, it would be, if that person is attending remotely, yes, and, you know, as we're all aware, next item on the agenda refers, you know, you could have a member that isn't unable to attend in person, but can still partake in the debate and vote. But that wouldn't be a proxy vote. It would only be if that member is not attending the meeting either in person or virtually, and they want another member to exercise that proxy for them.
Thank you, Lorraine. Councillor Michelle.
Yes. If somebody put in a proxy vote and hadn't actually listened to the debate, because if they could listen to the debate, they could vote online, wouldn't that be predetermination and make the debate a waste of time, really, if they decided beforehand without listening what was said?
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Fair point.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Predetermination is going to be the biggest stumbling block to exercising a proxy vote, but there may be very particular circumstances where it's perhaps almost a non-debate item that somebody could potentially exercise a proxy vote. You know, please don't ask me to give you a live example because I can't think of one off the top of my head. But I think the ultimate thing is the government are consulting on this. Ultimately, you know, the government will either legislate for it or they won't. But by all means, you know, if members have views on it, then please do take advantage of the consultation and submit your responses.
Thank you, Lorraine. Members, any other questions? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I was in a meeting today with the National Assembly of NAC, and they are really concerned on this point as well, to the extent that they are looking to put objections on the proxy vote as a whole through the country.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, for that point. It's interesting to know what others are doing there. Any other questions, members? No, thank you. Does anyone wish to debate this item? Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Harper-Wallace.
Just some comments in general around like remote working and my experience. I've worked with some companies that do hybrid working in person and remotely really well, and some that don't. In the ones that don't, the main key theme is that there's not a level playing field between the people who are remote and the people who are in person, i.e. that some people are maybe louder in the meetings if they're remote because their microphone is too loud, or maybe they can't hear people within the meeting. So I think if this does come into force and we're considering it, just one note that perhaps our IT team can maybe take that into consideration and maybe try and do a lot of testing, a lot of maybe get some new equipment, microphones, headsets, things like that for the remote. And also maybe on the democratic services side, how we would facilitate if a member remotely wanted to speak, but obviously they're remote, so we'd have to have like a highlighting thing to the chair. So just some comments around that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harper-Wallace. Does anybody else wish to speak? No? Okay, thank you, everybody. Councillor Perry, would you like to wind up?
Just to say, actually, I've taken on board what's been said. There is the opportunity at 7.2 for members to do their own consultation online, which has already been said. And the options that we've been given, obviously, when we know a bit more about it, we can have that discussion as a council ourselves. Okay, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Perry. So just a reminder, everybody, the recommendations are here are twofold. One, that members note the proposed response to the consultation, and two, that members note the 19th of December deadline to submit your individual responses to that consultation via the online platform. And my thanks to Lorraine in advance for being happy to circulate those. All those in favour of those recommendations, can I have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous, everybody. Thank you. The recommendations are approved. That moves us on to item 14, turning to page 147 in your document pack, and a proposed approval of absence. Can I ask the monitoring officer to present the report, please? Lorraine, over to you.
Thank you. Almost as if I'd planned it. So, members, as we're aware, Councillor Mrs Williams unfortunately continues to have a health issue. She last attended a meeting on the 26th of September 2023 and Council on the 20th of February of this year and again on the 16th of July of this year approved her periods of absence. I understand that Councillor Mrs Williams is hopeful of having treatment shortly after Christmas, but if reason for absence is not approved this evening, then Section 85, which is an automatic disqualification from holding office through non-attendance, would apply on the 16th of January. As members may also be aware, Councillor Mrs Williams has been unable to undertake her ward representative role from home and has attended some meetings online, but referring to the last report, that doesn't count for attendance under Section 85. It has to be somebody at the moment physically in the room. As members will be aware, we've just discussed the consultation on remote attendance, and obviously if that legislation is brought in, then that would negate the need to come forward for further approvals of absence, because remote attendance would enable Section 85 to be broken by that remote attendance. The recommendations are that Council approves the reason for absence, namely that of mobility issues caused by a long-term health condition for Councillor Mrs Kath Williams for a further period of 6 months.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine. Do we have a proposer, anybody? Councillor Perry.
Chair, happy to propose the reason of absence for the next 6 months for Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'd like to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Do we have any questions on this item, anybody? No, you're all questioned out. Lovely, thank you. Oh, we do. Oh, Councillor Harrison, sorry, you're right in front of me.
I must gesticulate more loudly in future, Chair. It's pertinent to this and the last issue that we just debated, which is really, given the timescales of any proposed potential legislation that might come through after the consultation, it seems unlikely to me that that's going to occur within the next 6 months. And I just wondered whether the monitoring officer thought that was also her view. Not to put you on the spot, but it seems likely that if unfortunately this operation or whatever doesn't happen in January, then we're going to be back here again in a further 6 months' time, and we will not have by that stage the option to allow remote attendance. Is that, am I understanding the situation correctly?
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Lorraine?
Yes, I mean, potentially. I mean, the government are obviously closing the consultation on the 19th of December. As we know, these things generally take several months from close of consultation. They haven't, as far as I'm aware, drafted any statutory instruments or anything that would provide for that. So I think realistically, and I think I did mention it 3.5 in the report, it is likely to be 7 months before that change in legislation is brought in. But obviously, if it was brought in before the Councillor Mrs Williams would trigger the next requirement for a report, then we'd deal with that. But if not, then yes, we would bring a further report back, depending on the circumstances at the time.
Thank you, Lorraine. Paul, that answer your question? Are you happy with that? Lovely. And apologies for nearly missing you out. Members, dare I ask any other questions? Oh, yeah, and all of a sudden. Councillor Kelly, and then we'll go to Councillor Brindle.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just clarifying it is for the previous 6 months that we just clarifying tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Yes, so this is to approve the reason for Councillor Mrs Williams' absence from her last approval, which was the 16th of July, to date. And then obviously, should she attend in January, it will no longer be an issue. Should she not attend for a further 6 months, then it would be a further report back.
Thank you, Lorraine. Councillor Brindle.
No, I think it was just answered. Might have been that. So in the next 6 months, we have to do this again. My question is, how long can we do this for? Is it in statute? Is it in law? How long can we just keep doing this?
Thank you, John. Lorraine?
There is nothing in statute to limit the number of approvals. Obviously, it becomes a matter of reasonableness, and that's why ultimately this is a council decision and why a report is brought to council, because council would have to take a view on whether they were satisfied that it would be appropriate to grant a further period of absence, which is, I think, why we do it on a 6-month basis, because it gives you that kind of automatic review period, if you like. So yes, it would be back within 6 months, and then it would be a matter for members.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine. Any other questions, members? No, and this time I don't think I'm missing anybody out. So we can move on to debate. Anybody wish to speak on this item? No, okay, thank you. You're all debated out as well, fabulous. Members, the recommendation therefore is the council approves the reason for absence, namely that of mobility issues caused by a long-term health condition for councillor Kath Williams for a further period of 6 months. All those in favour, can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you, everybody. Is there anybody against this proposal?
Chair, can I have a point of order, please?
Go on. Yes, councillor Callum.
Point of order is based on the wording. It states for a further 6 months. Isn't it for the past 6 months that we are voting on? Not for a further forward 6 months.
Yeah, thank you, councillor Kelly. Lorraine.
Yes, as detailed in the body of the report, it is from the period from the last approval of absence, which was the 16th of July. So it's for the period ultimately until the 16th of January. But then obviously Mrs Williams would have 6 months in which to attend again before it became an issue.
It just comes that we're voting for another 6 months forward. That's how I'm perceiving the wording.
I'm more than happy if members want that in the minutes we clarify that it's for the period to today.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, councillor Kelly, for that clarification. I'm guessing we can move. That doesn't change anyone's vote, or do we start again?
Hopefully members were clear that they were voting for that 6 month period to the last 6 months. And I'd got 24 that, so I think we're now against and abstentions.
Lovely. Anybody opposed? No, any abstentions? The motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. So that brings us finally, I can sense your anticipation there, everyone, to item 15, Chairman's announcements. So I'd just like to take you on a very brief journey of my whereabouts since the last meeting. And there have been quite a few highlights, both in my year to date and since the last meeting. It was an extraordinary privilege and an honour indeed to honour our fallen in this council chamber on Armistice Day, and also a wonderful honour to represent this district as chairman at my own parish's Remembrance Sunday service at St Benedict Biscop in Womben. At both of these, it was wonderful to see so many school children participating and reflecting. Informing and inspiring is, I think, central to ensuring that we really do never forget great sacrifice when and wherever it occurs. So I will always retain that as part of my chairman's year. That will always be a memory from evermore. We have continued, myself and Elizabeth, to be whisked across staffs, especially recently with carol services and Christmas-themed gatherings, which to date have all been absolutely spectacular. It's been wonderful to be part of. And I'm indeed looking forward to the County Council Chairman's Christmas Cracker evening this Friday. So that is in aid of his own charity. So really looking forward to that. And talking of highlights, there is one particular event that stands out recently, which was the Mayor of Lichfield's Masquerade Ball. So yes, the masks were indeed a little bit interesting, but it was a great time that we had. And so good, in fact, that it took me 5 minutes to realise the lady I walked out with was not Elizabeth. But we did rectify that, everybody. It wasn't a problem. I've now been banned from all such similar gatherings. That is a joke, by the way. It was lovely. We walked out together. That's fine. Masks were dropped very quickly after the opening of the event. Next to move on, a little date for your diaries, everybody. Quite in advance, I know. Friday, the 28th of February, I will be holding a charity 70s versus 80s night at Womben Civic Centre. So you are all invited. They are in aid of my charities. Please pass the invite when it gets to you on to anybody and everybody that you think might be interested and enjoy that evening. A good time is virtually guaranteed, and I do really very much encourage fancy dress. So if you've worn a Christmas tie tonight or a Christmas jumper, that's a good sign already. So please look out for that. And then finally, just to kind of wrap up this evening's quite extensive meeting already, I don't know whether any of you noticed, but it is Christmas. We are well into Advent now, and Christmas is merely days away. So I'd just like to say that whether you are councillors, whether you are officers or work with any of our partner agencies, please do take some time off to enjoy the Christmas break. You all work really hard and care about the community that you serve. And this is an opportunity for you to relax and undertake a little bit of self-care. You may all have noticed, in fact, I think some of you certainly noticed because I think they've gone already, but each of you have a little gift in front of you. Now, this is admittedly a very small, but it is a personal thank you from me as your chairman for all of your contributions to this council and in recognition of all you do for your residents. So whether you are councillors, whether you are officers, everybody, you should have something, and we'll make sure that those not present tonight get theirs too. Please enjoy it. If it's not for you, chocolate isn't for everybody. Spoiler alert. Gift it forward, please. You know, sort of it's well meant. Have a very Merry Christmas, everybody, and I look forward to singing some carols with you shortly in the Members' Lounge. Gives me great pleasure to announce that this meeting is therefore closed. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chairman. Please stand whilst the Chairman leaves the chamber.